This is a Zach Feldman Show replay on ZRadioLive.com.
The web's hit music station, Z Radio Live. This is the Zach Feldman Show. Joining me over the phone is an author. His name is Gn Hetherington, and he's a brand new book called Chemin de Compostelle. Gn, thanks so much for joining me here on the Zach Feldman Show. How's everything going?
It's going great, Zach. Thank you for having me.
Anytime. And ignore the fact that I'm just laughing my ass off because, you know, I can't stumble over the classiness of this broadcast. But tell me all about this brand new book.
This book is actually the 12th book in a series of books that I write. They're primarily based in France. It's a series of books called Hugo Duchamp Investigates. Hugo Duchamp is the detective. He's actually a French detective who comes back to France after spending time in England. Comes back to solve a murder. And we have a series of books that explore his time in France and also his family life and the murders that he investigates. It's been going since 2015, and as I say, the new one is the 12th in the series, so I'm very excited about it.
And you know, you haven't just written this book; you've written so many other books too that of just different investigations that this detective has gone through. I mean, he's obviously a world-class detective. I mean, is there anything that you've done in research of detectives that you've kind of can share with us about kind of figuring out how to make a good story detective?
I think one of the things when I started out, I wanted to make this different enough that it would be interesting for me to write, because I tried writing murder mysteries before I did these books, but it was always kind of difficult because you try to emulate what other people are writing, for example, or what's successful at the moment, and I found that I just couldn't do that. I had to do something that was easy for me, but also enjoyable for me. So I came up with this detective who, although especially in the first book is called Un homme qui attend. All the books, annoyingly, I know it's slightly annoying to people, have French titles, but obviously they are written in English. And in this particular book, he comes back to France after living in England for over a decade, and he really doesn't want to be there. He's sort of forced into it, but over the period of particularly the first book, we find him solving what is a horrific crime, but also finding that whatever he was scared of in France isn't really there anymore, and he's not a child, which he was when he was last in France. So we go on that journey with him. I found that it was easier to write that kind of book where I could explore the person. He's complicated. He's not difficult, but he doesn't really like people. So it was interesting for that. And from the first book onwards, we can clearly follow his journey, so that by, I don't know, maybe the sixth book, I think it is, he's in a relationship by then, he gets married, and it was just good to have that journey. But as I say, most of them are written set in France, but I also decided that it would be good to explore him in different territories. So, for example, in book 4, there's a story in Ireland. In book 7, it's in Russia. So it was good. It was difficult for me to transpose these stories into different jurisdictions. So we have French police. We also have Irish police and Russian police. So that kind of research was important to get right. So I spent a great deal of time doing that, really.
Well, I mean, you've written horror. I mean, not horror. Sorry, you've written the detective. Somewhat horror, but you've written more, of the mystery and like the investigation kind of stories, in the back of the day, and especially now, with this brand new book too. But were you always interested in like this unsolved mystery kind of realm?
Oh, absolutely. I think when I was very young, one of the first books I read was Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. And I think that always stuck with me from a very, very young age. I thought I kind of want to do something in that genre. But then I don't know if you've heard of Murder, She Wrote. It was very popular in England as well as America. And I think that was my first clue as to what I wanted to do. So that was definitely the inspiration for me. Those two things which kick-started this crazy career.
That's amazing. And now you've written so many different books too. I mean, is there any favorite of yours that you have any favorite books that you've written?
I think, from my perspective, I tend to have favorites of the ones that are the easiest to write. I mean, it's as simple as that. Some are very easy to write and I write very quickly. But an interesting thing happened. I think I was on book 7, the seventh book in the Hugo series. It's a book called La Famille Lacroix. And quite often, if I bring in new characters, they're there for the particular story. But in this particular novel, I needed a sort of another detective figure. So this character, she's called Charlotte Coco Brunhild. She appears in this book as just as a little minor character, but I really, really, really enjoyed writing her so much that I sort of went away and I hadn't thought about doing another series, but because of that, the next Hugo book, I thought she ended up coming back into that. I wrote her in that story, but then by the end of it, I thought, I'm going to write some Coco books. So I've begun a whole new series away from the Hugo Duchamp books, which are just Coco, the Coco Brunhild mysteries.
That's awesome.
Also set in France, but she is the polar opposite of Hugo. Whereas Hugo's very staid and very polite, but a sort of dogged investigator. She's chaotic. She's a single mother of 4 children. She's crazy and she's funny, a little bit rude, but I just thoroughly enjoyed it. So I think that those particular books that I first wrote where Coco came in are probably my favorites.
That's
but
awesome.
At the moment, I'm just really enjoying writing her books. So I'm enjoying it at the moment.
Is it difficult to kind of get yourself out of the Hugo mindset and to go off and write about Coco, or is it natural to you?
It's actually, I think, because I write them slightly differently. The Hugo books tend to be a little bit longer. They're a little bit more serious. They're more sort of investigation driven. So you get the autopsies and you get all that kind of thing. But also, because the story's a little bit more complicated, you find that there will be often flashbacks. So there might be a chunk of the book which is maybe 10 years ago, and then it goes back to present day, and then it may go back to 10 years again. So there's that kind of thing. But the Coco books, it wasn't my intention, but when I wrote her first book, it's called Sept Jours, which means 7 days. It just came to me just to make it slightly different. Each chapter is written from her perspective. So we see the whole story unfold as she does. So there's no flashbacks or there's no chapters devoted to other characters. Each chapter is just solely Coco's perspective of what's going on. So she walks into the crime scene, then she goes to the autopsy and those kind of things. So because of that, it ended up being very easy just to write these 2 different characters and these 2 different series of books. They're very similar stories, but just slightly different.
That's awesome. When you're thinking about what to write and think about where to put these characters in, I mean, where do you come up with the ideas for the investigation? Is that just all before you decide who's kind of doing the investigation, or is it just is it based off of real life?
I guess I don't try to do real life stories simply because I don't like to get into that perspective of that people can see things on the news and they might link the 2 stories. So I try to do something that's quite unique. So from that perspective, I prefer that. But the stories themselves are very easy. I will come up probably with a paragraph of how it would look on the back cover, what the back cover will say, and from that I build the story. So it might just be something simple like a person falls from the Eiffel Tower and Coco goes to investigate. So that's basically where I start from, and then I build the story from around that.
That's really cool. And I'm excited for those to take a look at all your books too, especially the ones, especially all these different series that you have here too. I really love the idea too about this other book you have. It's called Club Video. It's another prequel to the trilogy. Tell us a little about that series.
There's actually going to be a trilogy of these are about Hugo Duchamp before he becomes a police officer. So the first one begins when he's 15. His parents divorce, and neither of his parents actually want him. So he's sent to live with his grandmother, Madeline, who is this great Parisian grande dame. She's very cultured. She's very outspoken. She's very cutting. She doesn't really want her 15-year-old adolescent child, who turns out to be gay, living with her. But she also doesn't want the scandal of nobody wanting this 15-year-old child. So she obviously takes him in. She moves him into her attic. But over the period of time, it's quite clear that she falls in love with him. She didn't mean to, but Hugo falls in love with her. So they have this kind of really strange relationship where they both love each other, but they don't know how to love each other, certainly publicly. So I had this idea because I think I'd got to book maybe 10 of the Hugo books, and I was thinking about, was I going to keep going with them? Because 10 is a long series, and often people will not carry on. They'll maybe get bored, or they'll get fed up with the same sort of character. But I always wanted to explore more of Hugo, and it was quite telling because in the very first chapter of the first Hugo book, Madeline makes an appearance only in his memory, because we find out he lived with her, but she died when he was 18. So I already had this story that could only take place in a certain period of time. So I thought, okay, if we're going to do that, it would have to be a story about Hugo when he was very young. So that idea came, and I thought, well, okay, maybe we can explain how he ended up being the way he is, why he became a police officer. So that's sort of story came there. So the first one is called Hugo and Joseph. It's a murder mystery also, but it's also about the first time Hugo falls in love and his life in Paris. Then we have Club Video, which follows on from that, and it's another murder mystery where he gets himself in a lot of trouble, and almost somebody's out to kill Hugo. So it's a really good, fast-paced murder investigation as well,
and a good prequel to the series. And it's just
it's
so cool that you wrote that too.
Absolutely. I've just finished the third one, which is going to be the end of the prequel trilogy, and that's called Hugo and Madeline, and it ties it all up nicely. Not necessarily for Madeline because she dies, obviously, but it's a good way to finish the trilogy, and it's quite a sad story. But it also, you see Hugo at the end becoming the man that he's going to become in the adult books. So I'm glad that's done. That will be coming out next year. I've just finished it recently.
Oh, that's awesome, and I'm excited for those. I'm excited for everybody to check it out. And something about you too, that nobody knows, is that you also create the artwork too.
I do, yeah. I think from the very first book, Un Honky Attend, I had the idea for the cover, but all I had to really I just found a picture that was near enough. But as soon as we did that, it was always stuck in my head that I had a certain idea how these would look. But this also came about because we were designing the website, and because books aren't really artistic in the sense of it doesn't have art to go with it, I wanted pictures for the website. So I just luckily found this very young Portuguese artist called Maria, who I just managed to connect with, and I just said, I'm looking for a painting for my next book cover. I don't really know what I want, but I have a rough idea. If I give you maybe several different ideas, I want something in the background that looks like this, something in the foreground that looks like this. Could you try to see if you could come up with something that would look decent? So she went off and she did that, and she came back with this cover, and I thought that was perfect. It was just how I imagined it. So I think that was the third book. So from that moment on, she's worked with me on every book cover. I either send her pictures, or I have sent her little doodles that I do and say, I'd like this on the top bit and this on the bottom bit, and she goes off and paints them for me.
Oh, that's awesome.
I've been very lucky. They're beautiful covers. I mean, they're quite artistic in their own right. So very lucky to have found her. I'm very lucky that she still works with me.
That's amazing. And, I'm excited for also those who are listening to check out the entire series of books, including the Coco series. But Gn, where can people go to find all the books and everything that you've been working on?
Well, you can go to Amazon. There's an Amazon page to search for Gn Hetherington, or you can go to my website, which is just gnhbooks.com. All the books are listed on there. There's also promotional videos that we've done. But there are also now audio books, so you can go to Audible. I've been very lucky. We're working with some really great actors. There's an English actor doing the Hugo books, but there's also an American artist who is a young lady who's doing the Coco books. So they're all available on either Amazon or Audible or iTunes or wherever you get your data, really. Or you can go to my website.
Awesome. Well, Gn Hetherington, thank you so much for joining me here on the Zach Feldman Show. Seriously, best of luck with the career, and best of luck with all the books too. And I'm excited to see what else is next.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Zach. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. The Webs and Music Station, Z Radio Live, back with more Zach Feldman Show after this.
Want to hear more? Listen to the Zach Feldman Show every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on ZRadioLive.com.